Since no one can replicate the conditions when life or planets began, reputable investigators are left to interpret the data. Creationism is not opposed to legitimate scientific inquiry. Still haven't hit it yet? Was that Genesis 1:28? I think that's supposed to be Genesis 1:28. Sorry. Thank you, Jake. That'll help. I'm serious. So what I do is I type all the teacher notes and then I do the student notes, and sometimes I forget to mark things back and forth. Yeah, that blank there that's by itself, that's Genesis 1:28. Genesis 1:28. All right, what is evolution? The first blank there is the term evolution requires immediate clarification before intelligent discussion can occur, partially because there's actually two types of evolution. That's something that's not commonly discussed. Those that have done any kind of homework on evolution would know this. The next blank underneath this, okay? This is the term macroevolution. Macro, M-A-C-R-O, evolution, macroevolution, okay? And this would be an increase in organic complexity over eons, such as reptiles mutating into birds, okay? That's called macroevolution. That is one species literally changing into another species. Something else, though, this describes small changes that occur in a species over time, such as alterations in color or bone structure, is considered microevolution. Microevolution. Or, if you want to put this right after that sentence, it's also known as mutation, which, by the way, you and I legitimately would have to agree and believe in microevolution or mutation. It does happen, okay? How many of you ever met somebody who's albino? That is a mutation. That is a type of microevolution. In some societies, there's actually 1 or 2 countries in Africa where they actually have a growing population of albino people, okay? That is a genetic mutation, a type of microevolution that is actually expanding in that particular area of the world, okay? We actually would wholeheartedly believe in that. You take certain types of animals, move them out of their natural habitat, and introduce them to a new habitat, and over several generations, they will have adapted into their new habitat. Chernobyl, that lovely nuclear accident. Did you know that most of the animal species that live within about a 25, 30-mile radius of Chernobyl are actually now considered distinct species from those in the surrounding area due to generations now of that species living in a radiated environment? The birds are actually considered distinct species, but they are still birds. The birds haven't mutated and grown scales and turned back into lizards. They're still birds. They're just different than the cousins that they used to be directly related to. Does that make sense? So we would believe in that, okay? Your next blank here. In actuality, no evolution, no type of evolution is occurring as no increase in complexity, such as development of a new organ, is being generated, okay? Microevolution or mutation describes existing genetic traits that kind of just pass on back and forth, okay? The idea of a brand new organ suddenly showing up in a particular type of animal, that's not been observed anywhere. Let me give you an idea of that. My dad now has, how many is it? 4, 7, 9 grandkids. Do you know my dad's the only one in the family with blue eyes, and all of his grandkids have blue eyes? Anna has brown eyes. Sarah and I have kind of hazily green eyes. My wife's got green eyes. Dylan has green eyes. Rob has brown eyes. All the grandkids have blue eyes. My dad passed on a genetic trait that has popped up in all the kids, all of them. Now, I know almost all babies are born with blue eyes and some change over time. None of them have yet. Not one. They all have bright blue eyes. That is a genetic mutation, a type of microevolution that has bypassed the parental genetics to go into grandparent level genetics and passed itself on and will continue that way. That is a type of mutation or genetic or microevolution. Does that make sense? That we would believe in, okay? Rob is slightly taller than I am by literally about a foot. His kids are genetically inclined to be 6'5" by the time they're 3. Seriously, that's a type of microevolution. He's gonna pass along ginormous genes. On the other hand, all my kids are gonna end up with glasses. My wife and I have terrible eyes. My wife practically is blind. Seriously. Her and Mr. Ron, Adam, if you saw their glasses prescription, their glasses should be about that thick and then have binoculars on the front of that just so they could see across the room. It's crazy. They're gonna pass that along. That's a type of microevolution. Does that make sense? So we would believe in mutation. My kids are never gonna randomly turn back into monkeys. Now, sometimes they act like it. But if Paisley and Callie start growing excessive body hair, a penchant for bananas and throwing poop, we have a problem. They're not turning back into apes. You can't find me any evidence of a human being turning back into an ape. How come we turned into people from apes, but that's never gone backwards? If macroevolution, which is the main theory of evolution, is in itself true, there should be, in some way or another, always a backward step. It has to happen by just the basic odds. For steps forward, there always has to be steps backward. So there always has to be a reverse mutation to counterbalance, and we've never seen that. Does that make sense? Okay, we're gonna move on here. All right, I give you a couple more paragraphs there. You can read those on your own. 50 ways to dispute evolution. We're gonna try to breeze through these about as quickly as I can. Excuse me. Number 1 on the list here is paraconformity. P-A-R-A, conformity. Paraconformity. Okay? Paraconformity. This is a lovely, ginormous term that basically talks about rocks. Evolutionary geologists contend that rocks were laid down in a uniform, predictable manner over billions of years. Okay, that there are layers of rock. How many of you probably learned something along those lines in school, that there are layers of rock and that they give dates? Did you know that there's not a single place on earth that all the layers of rock actually add up correctly? Not one. You would think, with the size of our earth, that there'd be at least one, but there's not. In fact, almost all the places that you look, the layers of rock are even out of order. That can't happen. Did any of you watch the debate between Bill Nye and Ken Ham that aired about 2.5 years ago? I would encourage you, go on YouTube. It's quite lengthy. It's about 2+ hours long. Worth your time if you have the time to do so. Bill Nye, the science guy. Now, granted, the guy's an engineer. He's a build-it science guy, not an evolutionary science guy. But he has promoted evolution for decades to children, okay? He actually stated recently that anyone who believes that climate change doesn't exist actually has a mental disorder. So now he's a psychologist. He's Bill Nye the shrink guy, which is intriguing. I haven't figured out when he got that degree. He actually stated in there that the layers of rock, because Ken Ham addressed that and said, why can't you prove to me one spot where the rocks all line up? And Bill Nye's excuse was the layers of rock shifted, so old ones moved on top of the younger ones. Okay, mudslides, earthquakes, we can accept some change. But the problem is, if they were actually billion-year-old rocks that somehow got stacked on top of rocks that are, only millions of years old, the billion-year-old ones would turn into dust. They'd be too old. There's not a layer of dust, there's a layer of rock. So we have a bit of a problem there. Paraconformity. The term paraconformity, this is what's on your page here, describes those rock formations that are missing certain layers which are predicted by evolutionary geology. They should be there, but they're missing in whatever layer. One of the deepest canyons that we have visible to the human eye is the Grand Canyon. Do you know the Grand Canyon is missing almost half the rock layers that it's supposed to have? Supposedly the Grand Canyon's been carved out for millions of years. Should it not have all of them? Did you know that the very bottom layer of the Grand Canyon is considerably younger than the ones in the middle layer? That's confusing. What? Oh, okay. It's got a bunch, but it's missing several. Here's the other problem, okay? We're going to jump into this next one, geology reversed. Some of these go hand in hand. It's the words geology reversed. Okay, these again go hand in hand. Around the world, we see rock layers out of normal evolutionary sequence. Natural geologists believe the Earth's rocks were laid down in a uniform manner over billions of years. Okay, in one particular place, Glacier National Park, a block of Precambrian, which is old rock, sits on top of Cretaceous era, or literally by almost a billion years, newer rock. So you've got new rock and old rock literally opposite each other. That should not be able to happen. They also use that layering to identify the fossils, which is where you get some very confusing dates. How is it that old fossils end up on top of new fossils? Do you know what more than likely happened is there was this giant flood, and as it mixed up all the sediments, the heavier rocks settled towards the bottom, and then the lighter, and then the lighter, and so on and so forth until you had these very cool layers of rock. By the way, if you've ever been a kid that played with a bucket with dirt and water in it, you've seen the exact same thing take place. We call it Noah's flood. Covered the whole earth, would have carved out the Grand Canyon in a matter of a few minutes. Minutes. You realize if it had enough water to cover the highest mountains on the whole earth, and by the way, Mount Everest more than likely didn't exist in its current form prior to the flood. The flood probably made Mount Everest as tall as it was due to the shifting of water. That's still a lot of water, folks. Would have moved all that stuff around and would have changed all those layers of rock. Okay, moving on here. Next one, radiometric dating. This one has always intrigued me. How many of you ever watched the original Jurassic Park? I remember watching that when I was about 8 years old, okay? In that, they start the whole thing off when these scientists get into Jurassic Park, and they're talking about how these 65 million year old mosquitoes in amber that they found viable blood in. By the way, if it was 65 million years old, the blood wouldn't have been able to be pulled out with a syringe. Just thought I'd throw that out there. Blood turns into nothing after just a few weeks. Like it literally dissolves. It becomes dust after just weeks after death. 65 million years, they wouldn't have been drilling a hole and that wouldn't have worked. Just thought I just ruined Jurassic Park for like half of you, and I apologize for that, okay? They actually stated that based on radiometric dating or carbon dating, that's how they figured out some of this. Here's what I want you to jot down with this, or see here. This process attempts to place an accurate date on the age of rocks by measuring the decay of radioactive minerals trapped within, okay? Scientists first examine the relative ratios of various minerals in the host rock. Now, they end up with three basic assumptions with radiometric dating. The first, the rock contained no radioactive, what they call a daughter product atoms in the beginning, only parent atoms. So they assume that it had these different types of atoms and that as it's decayed, these atoms have actually changed form. That actually does, by the way, happen to some extent. When you die, you ain't gonna look as good as you do today. Okay, I hate to ruin that for you, okay? Yeah, and just within a few weeks, you're gonna look like a raisin, okay? And a few weeks after that, you're gonna look gross. My iguana died when I was like 11. My lovely sister Sarah decided about a year after our iguana died to dig him up. He did not quite look the same as when we had dug that little hole for him before. He was gross. My sister Sarah's gross. We're talking a 9-year-old dug up a year dead iguana just to see what it might look like. You change after time, and some of the atoms in your body begin to decay and kind of, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. You turn back into what you were made of, okay? So we do believe that there is some change, but this assumption actually is a little bit off because if you have any radioactive material in your body, it stays that way. Now, it does decay over time, but a little different. The second assumption here is since the moment of its creation, no parent or daughter atoms were either added to or taken from the sample of rock. They actually, the idea of this radiocarbon type dating or radiometric dating is that the one assumption that they take that probably blows away the rest is that there has been zero change in the radioactive structure. By the way, we're all mildly radioactive at any given moment. You do know that. You basically carry minimal amounts of radioactive material in your body at all times. They're just there. Now, they're minimal. That's why you don't glow in the dark, okay? That's why your hair doesn't just fall out, because it's not like that. Minimal amounts. There are certain types of isotopes in your body and in just about everything that have a minimal amount of radiation to them. Okay, some of that is due to the sun's radiation that beats upon our bodies. The one assumption here is that none of this radiation changes at any time. Well, that's not exactly true. Radiation levels change drastically. If you go spend any time with my mom today, her radiation levels inside her body are probably about 20 times higher than your average human being. Why? She's under radiation treatments right now. If you spend excessive amounts of time in the sun, your radiation levels will be higher than somebody who does not. Does that make sense? So if a rock is buried deep underground, yes, its radiation levels may stay fairly solid. But if that rock is on the surface, its radiation levels may actually be higher and or lower depending on its location, a bunch of other factors. The problem is this radiometric dating is flawed. Desperately flawed, okay? The third assumption is that the rate of decay has always remained constant, that the rate of this radioactive material's decay has never changed. Well, that's not exactly true. Has your personal decay changed? You're born. You realize from the moment you're born, you are actually dying. Okay, that's like a basic assumption of life. You get bigger for a while, and then you continue to get smaller. I'm on the smaller end of things, okay? We are actually slowly decaying. That's why things fall apart. That's why getting up in the morning becomes more painful than it used to. Come on, it's all right. I'm not making fun of old people. I'm heading there myself, all right? It's all good, all right? Is your personal rate of decay, are you the same as you were in your early 20s? No. We're playing volleyball tomorrow night. I'm dreading winning tomorrow night's first game because that means I have to play a second game. I want to win because I hate losing. I'm a terrible loser. But I really don't want to win because I'm tired. The second game is going to kill me. I'm not the young guy I used to be. Jumping like that for 40 minutes really kills me after a while. I wear these really stupid looking knee pads that everybody makes fun of me for. They look like man leggings. Okay, I wear them because my knees can't handle what I used to do. My rate of decay has not remained uniform. Due to some things I've done, there are certain parts of me that are falling apart more than others. So my rate of decay is not uniform. Why would we believe that about anything else? Does that make sense? Okay, moving on. Number 4. Okay, again, some of these go hand in hand, and that's on purpose. Oil and coal are young. That's actually what goes in your blank there. Oil and coal are young. Okay, when carbon-14 test, or the radiometric testing we just talked about, was first created, scientists used the process to date all sorts of things. Once they discovered it, it was kind of like, hey, let's see how old this is. You ever been there, you figured out how to do something for the first time, and you wanted to see if it applied to everything? We bought a cast iron skillet about 3 weeks ago. I have cooked everything under the sun in that cast iron skillet just to see if it works. I've never used one before. My mother-in-law had one, and she actually thought that the black stuff was dirt, so she scraped it clean. Ruined it. It made me mad because that thing was like 80 years old. I mean, it was solid. Ruined it. So I bought my own. I have cooked everything in there. Steak in a cast iron skillet is, whoo. I made that last night. It was good. Okay? Are any of you like me where you figure out something new and you're like, hey, I wonder if this works on that too. Okay, you figure out like a new condiment, something good that tastes, I wonder if this tastes good on that. We invented, maybe didn't invent it. My family came up with chili corn dogs a couple weeks ago. We had leftover chili and we were gonna make chili dogs, and Paisley, my daughter, loves corn dogs. So we pulled the stick out of it and put chili and cheese on top of that. Oh my goodness, that is terrible for you, but it's so good. You got your cornbread, your hot dog, your chili, your cheese, throw a little mustard, some onion on there. Dude, that'll change your life. It'll also change your cholesterol and waistline levels, but that's all right. These guys, when they first came out with this carbon-14 or radiometric dating, they literally dated everything under the sun. One of the testers actually dated his wedding ring to see how old the gold was. That's how excited these guys were about this. But one of the first things that they tested was oil and coal, because it was assumed that they were extremely old. Tests of these two substances by the carbon-14 or radiometric dating method revealed them to only be several thousand years old instead of millions of years old. Now, you do know when you pump gas into your car, that is a refined version of a dinosaur, right? That's so cool. I have a dinosaur-powered car. That's just, I'm dumb, I know, you'll get over it, but I just think that's so cool. That literally pops in my head about once every time I pump gas. Like, thank you, Adam and Eve. They're in my car now. Just thought I'd throw that out there, okay? The actual tests put oil and coal no more than 10,000 years old. By the way, that actually falls close to what our Bible would say. If you follow the genealogies back, this guy named Ussher, James Ussher, decided to follow all the genealogies in the Bible back and put creation somewhere around 4004 BC, which is a little over 6,000 years ago. The one thing he couldn't account for is how long Adam and Eve were in the garden before they fell. We don't know how long that was. That could have been a day, could have been a week, that could have been thousands of years. There's no record of any kind of a time period. By the way, radiocarbon dating on actually a whole bunch of different substances puts Earth somewhere around 6,000 to 10,000 years old, which falls right in with what the Bible says. Amen. Just thought I'd throw that out there. Okay, number 5. I'm trying to go quickly. Give me a couple more minutes. Permanence of kinds. The word permanence, it's like permanent. Permanence of kinds. I know I'm a little hard to understand this morning. I apologize. Permanence of kinds. It's also known as stasis. I should have given you the easy one in the blank, huh? Okay, stasis. This field of observation has determined that most animals have remained relatively unchanged throughout the fossil record. That's an intriguing thought. They haven't changed. Huh. Okay, this is despite millions of supposed years and billions of chances to evolve into higher life forms. No evidence exists for this theory. Many fossils from older rocks, when compared to their modern counterparts, are often identical in form. One we're going to get into later, you've probably heard of before, the trilobite. Okay, it's considered one of the oldest, slightly advanced creatures found in the fossil record. In fact, they're found on every continent. Fossils have been found in every ocean. They look like a giant pill bug. In some cases, these bad boys were about this big. If you ever run across a pill bug this big, run. It might eat you. Okay? One thing that they found, though, these lovely fossils, their eyes, the lenses on their eyes were made out of what's called calcite. Again, this is a note we're going to cover a little bit later. I thought I'd throw it in here, though, the permanence of kinds. The calcite in their eye, by the way, calcite is a type of rock. The actual lenses on these bugs' eyes were made out of rock. And they actually had 2 lenses on their eyes. How many lenses does a human being have on their eyes? 1. These were an ancient multi-billion-year-old type of animal that is supposed to be lesser evolved than we are, that actually had an eye that was somewhere around 15,000 times more accurate than ours. That doesn't happen. Things don't evolve backwards. If that's true and we're the most evolved life form that's ever lived on Earth, shouldn't our eyeballs be better? Which, by the way, each of your eyeballs, if you put it in a camera speak, is about 576 megapixels per eyeball. Collectively, you have a nearly 2 gigapixel vision, which is why you can see things in such amazing detail. They're just now inventing cameras that are even close to the detail of the human eye, but they don't have the focusing ability. Your eyes focus and change focus over 100,000 times a day. And they don't wear out. They don't break suddenly. Your eyeball doesn't just and just stop working one day. Not often. Not without some kind of outside influence. Permanence of kinds. There is no fossil record of an actual animal that is in between one of two species. None. We're going to look at a few of those here in just a little bit. Number 6, and it's the last one, and we'll be done. Transitional life forms. Again, a lot of these are tied in together on purpose. Transitional life forms. If life has always been in a continual stream of transmutation or switching from one species to another, as evolutionists insist, then we would expect to find many fossils intermediate between all species. The one thing your average evolutionist will argue with is the fact that most macroevolution, the idea of changing from one species to another, has stopped. Well, if evolution in and of itself is true, it shouldn't ever stop. Which, let me throw this at you. If we came from a species of ape, there are over 700,000 great apes on Earth that are supposedly directly related to humans. Bonobos, chimpanzees, gorillas, and orangutans. Over 700,000 of them collectively on Earth. There's over 7.5 billion human beings. By just basic ratios, there should be several million Bigfoot-like creatures that are half animal, half human. How come Bigfoot's never been found? History Channel's been trying to prove it for like 5 years. They even have a dude that is a professional Bigfoot call expert. How do you get a job like that? That sounds like a job Mike Raymond would rock out. And he's like, yeah, get paid to make dumb sounds on TV. You do realize that Bigfoot would have to be real. Let's pray and we'll get out of here today. Dear Lord, thank you for everything you do for us. Lord, thank you for giving us a book that's accurate. Lord, thank you for giving us a book that's real. Lord, thank you for giving us something to believe in. Lord, bless the services today. Give Pastor Bishop the wisdom and the power and the strength to preach this morning. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. You are dismissed. See you guys next week.